We're here to protect you and the ones that you love. It's a good feeling to know that our efforts aren't going unnoticed.
It actually brought tears to my eyes to know that we have this support.
You're welcome. I must just say, you're welcome. It's stressful, but we're not going anywhere.
Welcome to another edition of Bucknell Men's Water Polo Through the Decades. Tonight we have the decade of the 1980s at Bucknell. My name's Todd Newcomb, and I've got a great group of alums here, a lot of talent on this call, joining head coach John McBride and one of our current student athletes, Kyle Polo. And Kyle is a senior center defender from Chicago, Illinois, and we appreciate him being on the call tonight. I want to thank Geisinger as our sponsor for tonight's call. Geisinger has done a great job throughout the pandemic for the entire Pennsylvania area and our local communities. And as always, they do a great job day in and day out with our student athletes here at Bucknell. So thank you to Geisinger. Let me introduce our guest, and then I'll turn it over to Coach McBride and Kyle. The first guest from the class of 1981 is Tony Paxton. Tony, who transferred to Bucknell from Michigan, became a 3-year letter winner for the Bison, and he owns the school records for save percentage in a single season at 65.7 in 1980 and a career at 63.3. He ranks third on the career list with 833 career saves. He was a 3-time All-Eastern Championship first-team selection, and Tony was inducted into the Bucknell Athletics Hall of Fame in 2016. Our next guest, also from the class of 1981, is Scott Schulte. Scott was a 4-year letter winner and team captain in 1980. 39 years after graduation, he still holds the school records for overall points at 842, goals at 586, and assists at 256. He scored 5 goals or more in a game 62 times in his career at Bucknell. He was all Mid-Atlantic Conference first-team selection in 1977. He was a 4-time All-Eastern Championship first-team selection. He was the high scorer in the NCAA tournament for 4 straight years. He was named a second-team All-American in both 1979 and 1980. He won the Christy Mathewson Award at the Athletic Department Senior Awards Dinner, and he's a member of the CWAPA Hall of Fame, as well as the Bucknell Athletics Hall of Fame, where he was inducted in 1986. Our next guest from the class of 1986 is Jeff Hilk. Jeff was a 4-year letter winner and team captain in 1985. He ranks third on the career chart with 460 career points and third with 334 goals. He was an All-Mid-Atlantic Conference first-team selection in 1984, a 2-time All-Eastern Championship second-team selection. He was named Honorable Mention All-American in 1985. He won the Albert E. Humphreys Award and the Christy Mathewson Award at the Athletic Department's Senior Awards Dinner. Jeff was inducted into the Bucknell Athletics Hall of Fame in 2010. Our next guest from the class of 1987 is Paul Duffy. Paul was a 4-year letter winner and the team captain in 1986. He was a 3-time All-Mid-Atlantic Conference first-team selection, including the conference most valuable player in 1985. He was a 2-time All-Eastern Championship first-team selection and a second-team selection 1 time in his career. And our final guest from the class of 1989 is Garen Kopecky. Garen was a 4-year letter winner and team captain in both 1987 and 1988. He ranks 4th on the career chart with 443 points and 4th with 316 goals. He was an All-Mid-Atlantic Conference second-team selection in 1985 and an All-Mid-Atlantic Conference first-team selection in both 1986 and 1987, and he was also the conference most valuable player in 1987. He was a 3-time All-Eastern Championship first-team selection and a second-team selection once. He was named Honorable Mention All-American in both 1987 and 1988, and he won the Bison Club Award at the Athletic Department Senior Awards Dinner. So, Coach, a ton of talent on this phone call or this Zoom call. Let's have some fun. I'm going to turn it over to you.
Yeah, before we begin, welcome, guys. It's good to see all of you again. Love hanging out with you guys. Garen, you were also on the national team. Scott, were you on the national team? Who was on the national team? Raise your hand. Okay, good. Well, we got to mention that, Todd. I mean, USA Water Polo. Yeah. Yeah, but before we begin, the great memories of your time here at Bucknell. Can you update us on your personal life? Where do you live, career, family, etc.? We'll start with you, Tony.
Well, it's not too exciting. Living in Maryland, married for 30, 31 years, 32 years, something like that. 2 kids, and just living the dream in the middle of the pandemic.
Awesome. Jeff?
Well, unlike Tony, my life is actually very exciting. I live in New York City. I work for a software company headquartered here in New York called Diligent Corporation, where I'm the chief revenue officer. And my wife and 2 young daughters, Lynn and I, live on the Upper West Side of Manhattan, here in New York.
Awesome. Paul?
I live in Hillsborough, New Jersey, which is about 20 minutes north of Princeton. I've been married for 28 years. I have 2 boys in their mid-20s, and I'm an account manager in chemical sales for the last 30 years, with 3 different companies total. So a career salesperson.
Karen?
Yeah, hi there, guys. I'm the lone, I guess, non-East Coaster in the group. I'm from Chicago, and after spending time on the East Coast after college, I went back to Chicago. I've been here now for the last 24 years, and I have 2 grown children now that both actually grew up swimming and playing water polo. And my youngest boy is actually still at Loyola Marymount in California. So I'm happy to be still part of the sport and doing my part.
Scotty?
So 3 older kids. Middle daughter, Devin, went to Bucknell, played soccer. Oldest one went to Hopkins, played soccer. And Logan played baseball. So none of them played water polo. And then I have an 11-year-old, well, she's about to be 11, Madison. We live up in New Canaan, Connecticut. And I have my own firm, MFS Capital Advisors, in the lower middle market investment banking area. Been in that business a long, long time. I coached the New York Athletic Club water polo team with Jeff for about 10 years, if not more. We've been associated with whatever. Garen played with the New York Athletic Club. Tony played with the New York Athletic Club. So still involved in the sport, and now I'm also involved in it from an age group level with this Connecticut Premier Water Polo. So now I can't get it out of my blood. What can I tell you?
Yeah. So something that I've always been interested in is, I'm really kind of fascinated with why you guys chose Bucknell and how the recruiting process for you went and what helped you make that decision. So I guess we'll kind of go in the same order. And you can feel free to jump in if you want to say something funny about maybe you hosted one, maybe you hosted somebody else and there's some kind of PG story you want.
We'll never get through this thing if we do it that way, John.
Let's be PG.
I'll cut everybody off with a story.
The guy that has to hit the bleep button for the for this editing. So go ahead.
Mine was probably a little more interesting in that when I started at University of Michigan, I'd gone there to study engineering, and it was a club sport. I had 2 Olympic swimmers on there and some other guys really good. My first game was actually against Bucknell. And the second year, they ended up discontinuing so I transferred, and I was looking to transfer, and it was between Brown and Bucknell. And so Coach Russell seemed very interested, and obviously I was working with Mark Gensheimer and Scotty, and kind of was leaning that way. But when I went at NCAA's, I went with Mark Sickle, and we flew up to watch NCAA's and saw Bucknell play Berkeley in the first game, and I met with Ed Reed and to see his interest in me, and he just looked at me and he said, "Well, I got 3 guys from California. I really don't need another goalie." And I just thanked him, shook his hand, and left, and never lost one.
Wow.
So that was that.
Okay. Hilt?
Yeah, so I was, Dick Russell did a fantastic job of recruiting me to come to Bucknell. I was actually out of the Midwest, coming out of the swimming hotbed of Cincinnati, Ohio. And I was both a swimmer and a water polo player in high school. And Coach Russell took a bit of a chance on me. I think he saw how fast I was and how big I was, but wasn't sure really of the quality of the water polo out of Ohio at the time. But I was getting recruited by a lot of swimming schools in both the Midwest and East Coast, but really only recruited water polo wise from Bucknell, Cornell, which was a club program at the time, and also Mr. Reed up at Brown was recruiting me as well, and had a somewhat similar experience that Tony did. But I think what iced it for me was I came to Bucknell on a beautiful fall weekend, and they hosted what was then called the Bucknell Invitational, which had the top 8 or 10 teams in the country, along with the New York Athletic Club. And they packed the house on Friday night for an 8 o'clock game, and there were some beverages flowing around in the stands at the time, which I think you could get away with. And I said, "Oh man, seeing a water polo game played at Old Freeze Rook Natatorium with hundreds and hundreds of fans in the stands, many of the female persuasion, being used to playing in high school in front of our parents and maybe 1 or 2 others. So it was a great experience up there at Bucknell, and once again, Dick Russell did a tremendous job of recruiting me and make me feel like a welcome part of the program.
Awesome. Paul?
My story is a little different than the two of them. I'll take it back to my sophomore year in high school when I went to Lawrenceville School. I just learned the sport from my sophomore year with Hal Wilder, our head coach. And as I was looking at colleges, Hal Wilder was a big influence as to where he thought would be a good fit for me. But there's also another caveat that my older brother Sean, who's a year older than me, he was already a freshman at Bucknell. So I talked to my agent, who was my father. He did all these deals, and he negotiated with Dick Russell, and I applied early decision to the school. I was accepted, and didn't look back. I love being at Bucknell.
Awesome. Garen?
Yeah, so interestingly, being from Chicago, I have to admit, I had never heard of Bucknell when I was in high school. I somehow, in Chicago, as I know you know, Coach, the water polo season is in the spring. And somehow Dick Russell found me, sent me a letter and a brochure of the team brochure for that year. And that was it. It was just kind of a high introductory letter. And I literally went, where the hell is Bucknell? And but he was pretty persistent. And I don't know how he found me after my sophomore year in high school, but he was pretty persistent. And as I look back at that time, I had only 4 letters in high school that came to me. One was from a guy named Ralph Erickson, the coach at Loyola University at the time. One was from, of all people, Ted Newland from UC Irvine. Most of his letter was outlining all the challenges that would face me if I chose UC Irvine. But nevertheless, it was interesting to get that letter. And then I got a letter from Doc Councilman for obviously not water polo, but for swimming. And those are all obviously legendary names. And I just, as I came out to Bucknell and as I visited the campus, and got to give a little bit of credit to Jeff Hilk for showing me around the campus a little bit. I'm not sure those recruiting tactics were totally legal, but they did what they had to do, and had a wonderful experience at Bucknell. So can't be happier that I chose that school.
Well, recruiting was the wild, wild west back then, so it was there were no rules really, I don't think. But Scotty.
Yeah, so pretty much similar to Jeff. I was really more of a swimmer. My high school coach got us playing water polo mainly because he never wanted us out of the water. And like all of us, we were swimmers that got kind of burned out of swimming, and then got a taste for water polo and fell in love with it. When I was kind of being recruited, I looked at, ironically, I didn't know with Jeff, you were looking at Cornell too, but for me, it was Cornell. My father had gone to Cornell. I was looking at Cornell pretty closely. I looked at with Ralph Erickson up at Loyola and Bucknell. I say that those were probably the three that I was more thinking about. I really wasn't at that water polo level to go to California at that point. And I went with my high school team up to play Bucknell my senior year. And back then you could do that, right? You can't do that now. One of the many rules. And I think Russell saw me play that game in my senior year. And then I did really well in swimming. And it came down to Bucknell and Cornell, candidly. And Bucknell, Russell was the same coach, right? That was a real draw with Reed too, because Reed coached swimming and coached water polo. And the difference was that I don't know, Jeff, when you were going to Cornell, but it was a different guy named Perkins was a swim coach, and Al Ganner, someone was a water polo coach. Had the same shitty pool, okay? Had an Ivy League education, which it's tough to turn down. But they were going varsity in water polo, and amazingly, Russell was an amazing recruiter in a very subtle way. It's kind of like you scratch your head and you say, what was about that guy? But somehow you found a way to like him, and he really was a persistent recruiter. And the end of the day is, I came from a small high school, a prep school too. Bucknell was a smaller school. He made me feel very comfortable. I was obviously going to be able to do both sports and develop, and chose Bucknell, and was off to the races.
Did he send you guys a letter like he sent everybody else promising you a new pool?
Oh yeah, absolutely, man. That was his. At least he was consistent, right? He was consistent.
Yeah, across decades, apparently.
The 25-year promise, right?
Yeah. Well, apparently it's a 35-year promise.
It takes check to mail to a different level there, man.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to introduce you guys to Kyle. Like you said, he's from Chicago. He's a center defender. I actually saw Kyle Guerin at one of the at that summer clinic that we do, where we with Abdu, and it was me and Gavin Arroyo from Long Beach State that were just staring at him all weekend because he's 6 foot whatever, and swims I don't know 141 in the 200 or something crazy. So we were like, we got to get this guy as a center defender. But Kyle is now a captain, senior. Hopefully he has a senior year to play. We're pushing for that. But Kyle had a couple questions for you guys, so we'll kind of just keep going in the same direction. So go ahead, Kyle.
Thank you guys for having me here. My first question would be, what advice would you give me or any other players that are in this program today about the college water polo experience at Bucknell?
Go ahead, Tony.
Well, it's been a long time, and things have definitely changed in what you can and can't do. So my experiences are probably radically different than what you're going through, but I would still say that having some balance in your life is important. We worked really hard when we were, training, and we trained all year. But we still went to school and got good grades and had a heck of a social life. So we just kind of went balls to the walls in everything we did. And I think if you do that, you'll be very successful.
As long as you stay under 25 people in a group. That's the new rule. So how about you, Jeff?
Yeah, I think Tony hit the nail on the head there with balance, because it's all a question of setting your goals, Kyle, in terms of what you want out of your academic experience at Bucknell, your athletic experience at Bucknell, and very importantly, your social experience at Bucknell, which everyone now realizes maybe we took for granted with the pandemic, and was taken away from many folks in the spring, and as John mentions, is limited now. It is what you learn in terms of the discipline that you set for how much time you're gonna spend on the books, and how much time you're required to get the grades you want, and the time you've got free to do other things. you'll apply that discipline to balance your life for the rest of your work life. Yeah, as you start to think about how you set work-life balances later in life, and how much time you spend with your family as opposed to work and other pursuits. So that's really my suggestion or guidance that I would speak to.
Paul?
Kyle, what's your major?
I'm an econ major.
Okay. So I think what you should do is make sure you study harder, because water polo doesn't pay the bills. Okay. But these guys are right. It's all about the balance. It's really enjoying what you want to do and what career path you want to take. There we go.
Karen? Fellow Chicagoan?
I actually had this conversation just yesterday with a guy who was a swimmer at Iowa, and he was talking about regrets and how he regretted that he didn't work harder when he had the opportunity to be at his best in those college years. And he said, the time goes by so fast, and he spent a lot of his time, exploring the fraternity lifestyle and doing a lot of other things. And he goes, I wish I could have reached my full potential as a swimmer, because I felt like I kind of coasted my way through those years as a swimmer because I had all these other things on my plate. And what we actually concluded in that conversation was, if you're going to take the time to be on a team in a Division I sport at this level, why not put everything you got, obviously to everybody's point with balance of academics and such, but put it all out there so you can reach as high a potential as you possibly can, so you don't leave the school and maybe think 15 years down the road that you could have been a better player, or you could have been a different type of contributor on the team. And, I think I have the satisfaction of saying, I think I worked as hard as I possibly could to reach my potential while I was in those 4 years at Bucknell. And I would just tell these guys, make the most of your time when you got that opportunity to play at that level.
Scotty?
Kind of tough going last on this kind of conversation because you pretty much covered it all. But, the thing is, listen, when you're a student athlete, you got to make sacrifices. I mean, yes, we did have a social life, but the reality is you were getting up at 6:30 in the morning to go work out. After you go work out, you go to class all day, then you go back and rest, then you study, you're going back for another play. Every weekend in the fall, you're gone. We were gone all the weekends, and then you go right into another season. You sacrifice a lot for a sport that you love, and it's like anything. If you're getting success out of it, you keep doing it, and the more and more success you have, the more and more effort you put in. I think I'm a big believer, like Jeff and everybody else, about balance. I think that the reason I'm still involved in it today is also the network and the relationships. You can take this relationships that you've built. I mean, in particular, Jeff and Tony, and even I've been around them even now 20, 30, 40 years later, and that's because of a bond of a sport. And that bond you build with these guys you're playing with now could be with you forever. And the network you can use water polo for, even in the business world, not only just in the character you build as setting goals and everything else, the people you meet through Bucknell and through water polo, it can be pretty amazing. And you can take advantage of that.
Awesome. So having coached here now for 10 years, all I hear about is how much of an impact Dick Russell made on generations, truthfully. And my goal is always to not be him, but hopefully someday, there'll be at least one decade of guys that I want to sit around in a Zoom call and talk about me. But we'll kind of open this up a little bit. But can you share what kind of impact he made on your life, and maybe any funny Dick Russell stories, Coach Russell stories that that I'd love to hear? I mean, I think I've heard a bunch, but I'd love to hear some more. So kind of open it up, and if you guys feel like you want to talk about how he impacted your life, that'd be great. And any stories would be great.
Well, for me, it was a big swing when I went from 40,000 people at University of Michigan to 3,000 at Bucknell, and uh, became a part of a very unique clique because we were obviously a very strong team back then, making NCAAs every year, and playing against the best and having a lot of success. Coach Russell, I think, his forte was not X's and O's. He was a football coach at heart. But what I think what he did for us was he motivated us and made us responsible and motivated and prepared. So we, as you'll find out, most of our guys played year round, and we just love the sport and the teamwork so much that we are always working to try and make the team better. And there was a camaraderie there that, as Scotty mentioned, you can't put any kind of real words to it. It's just so strong. And I think that Coach just kind of was the glue that pulled us together without telling us what to do. He just found a way to kind of let us form the team and drive the team towards success. Funny story, the only, well, there was plenty of stories, most of which I can't tell you about, but the one that's still I remember vividly was we were up at Brown getting ready for Easterns, and we were in between games, and we were at this hotel.
You took my story, Tony.
Yeah. So Ginsheimer and Scotty and I and a couple others, we thought it'd be funny to pull one on Coach. So we got a banana and put it in the parking lot. And so Scotty's lying down the ground in pain and agony, and we're screaming at Coach, come on over. And we told him, yeah, he slipped on the banana. And Coach fell for it. And it was hysterical because he thought his whole career was over. Because his blonde bomber was hurt.
Great acting skill, I might add.
There you go. That's my one story I can tell. Sorry if I stole your thunder there, Scotty.
Anybody else?
Well, I'll talk about Russell for a second. I mean, it's one of those, as I said earlier, you kind of scratch your head, right? You look at it and you go, okay, like Tony said, like the X's and O's, you almost like you were like a basketball coach, right? All right, Scott, you're coming down the floor, you're going to call out play 2 or play 3 as you're setting up and obviously it doesn't happen that way. But, he obviously was extremely dedicated to the sport. And, the way you're everything about what you do is you're that dedicated, it's going to feed into your players. And as much as he wasn't the, never had any national, never coached a national team like you, John, never was involved with the highest level players, he made the most of what he had. There's no question about it. And, he had a certain dry sense of humor to him. Everyone always, would always have a story about me, especially with him taking that station wagon and following him in the van behind him and then losing him. I didn't know where you were, and the next thing you know, you meet up with him again. I don't know if it was that same trip to Brown where it was something was going on up at Mays Easterns, and something was going on that weekend, and we couldn't get a hotel. And he takes us to this hotel called the Harriet Bradford, and I think it was like the by the hour rate. I mean, it was really ridiculous. And we go to our rooms and there's hair in the beds and the whole bed. And we're just like, we got to get out.
It was a whorehouse.
It's the same.
I've arrested a few people at the Harriet Bradford.
Yeah. You're from Rhode Island. You know the area, right? Yeah. That was really crazy. And the other thing, obviously, he's known for is the number of cigarette butts and Coca-Colas he drank. I mean, he had thousands of them.
Don't get on my way.
Thank you. I'm just on the phone. Thousands of them right outside the pool. You know, you could follow where Dick Russell was based on everything he did. You know, where the Coke can was and where the cigarette butts were. And you see, like, okay, this guy is trying to, you know, big us into these amazing athletes, and he, you know, he's not exactly the epitome of health in what he's doing, but he had a way of doing it, and you know, in a quirky way. You know, I think everybody respected him tremendously, which is, you know, the bottom line in being a successful coach.
Yeah, I'll just riff off that a little bit, Scotty. Is that, you know, yeah, Coach was a tremendous recruiter. He brought in athletes. He was sort of like a Red Auerbach. He got the good players to come and play for the team, and then he expected a lot. And there were a lot of good players that they came to Bucknell and didn't have the focus or the drive, and didn't stay with the program because he demanded so much of them. Good players, really good players. You know, he worked you hard. He got you in great shape, like Tony said. He taught you a lot of discipline in the water in terms of, you know, maybe when not to shoot, when not to throw the ball away. But yeah, when it came to X's and O's and what to do in the last 2 minutes of a game, you know, he might have been a bit challenged, but we usually knew what to do. But riffing off Scotty there, I like Tony said, I have a great story that from NC2As in 1985, which I cannot tell. But I will tell you, one day I came out of the weight room, and I was, you know, just, you know, in the Michael Phelps, you know, shape of my life, you know, just, you know, burning up, you know, 20,000 calories, eating everything in sight. Just came out of the weight room and got on the scale and was just, you know, came off the scale and said, "Coach, look at this, you know, 6'3", 190 pounds. I'm in the best shape of my life." And he said, "Helk, I'm 6'3", 190. We're built exactly the same." And I'm looking at this guy with these little shoulders and these chicken legs and this pot belly sticking out. He's got a Coke can in his hand and a cigarette in his hand. I'm saying, "Coach, you're not exactly motivating me here." You know? He was a piece of work. He was a piece of work.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Anybody else?
I don't know how we ever really got in the swimming shape we were in for water polo, because we're in this dungeon of a pool, 25 yards, that we had to flood every season. We could never control the chlorine for games, because after a tournament, we'd have to wash our eyes out with milk, right, to relieve the sting. But then we'd go to the Navy's and the Browns pools, and their huge pools, and be able to keep up with them. So that was really impressive on how he did it. I have one story, like most of us here. I was a swim around water polo player. This is a swimming story, but it revolves around Coach Russell. It was January when we came back to campus for the Jan plan, which I know you younger kids don't know what that is, because you I don't know, where do you go for your training in January? Another country. But we're back in Lewisburg doing a practice. Coach goes out that side door for a quick smoke and some Coke, and he leaves one of the doors open, and it's freezing cold out because it's January. So the cold air comes in, it creates a film of mist across the pool. Coach is out smoking, the whole pool stops. Nobody's swimming. Coach gets done with smoke, he comes in, everyone just resumes swimming again. And I don't know if you even knew what happened, but we got a chuckle out of that. We got to skip 300 yards maybe.
Let me just say, Paul was probably the one guy on the team that could get under Coach's skin like nobody else. And I still remember, you know, him going, you know, "Where's Duffy?" You know, because Paul would be up sleeping on the diving board, maybe waiting for Coach to find him or something like that.
I was not a morning person, and freshman year, I roomed with Dave Hosepian, who went to Lawrenceville with me as well. And we just could not get up in the morning. So at whatever time the practice was, 5 a.m., our phone in the dorm room would ring. I answered it the first time, and I got this, "Where's Duffy? You're late for practice." So about twice a week, we'd get a phone call from Coach Russell. we knew not to answer the phone. We just hopped on our bikes and rode down to practice because we just couldn't get up in time for it.
Let me just say, as I guess one last comment I wanted to make is that I had the interesting, I guess, position to be in where I had 2 years of Coach Russell, his last 2 years as a water polo coach, and then I had 2 years of Lynn Comer, which was a very interesting time also having the first female coach of a water polo NCAA team, right? And, you know, as far as Coach Russell goes, I got to say, it's, as I look back on those years, it's, and somebody said this earlier, I don't know what his gift was of taking a band of I don't want to say misfits, but just a ragtag group of sorts and turning them really into a brotherhood, right? Turning them into a group that just, I don't recall drama. I don't recall fights and arguments and issues and things. I think we all just had a great time. We got along great, and the atmosphere was always just a lot of fun. We worked hard and we laughed a lot. And I just feel like somehow Coach created that culture where we all just really enjoyed the experience from the first day to the last of it.
You know, the one thing sorry, Garen.
No, go ahead.
It was going to go back to what Paul was saying. It made me think about it. When you think about what was done in that pool, okay, you know, as we all know, how do you work counterattack practice in that pool? How do you work 6-on-5 in that pool? You know, how do you work as, you know, think of it, just, I mean, it reminds me of the New York Athletic Club and, you know, how small that pool is and what we can do. It's just the fact that you could train to play in the bigger pools, playing in that pool is a feat in itself, because you just can't work, you know, you can't do the things you normally do. But it was repetition. Maybe it was a little boring at times about his training, but it was very repetitive, and you got a system down and kind of everybody knew what their role was, especially with our team. You know, we had certain players that, you know, they knew what they had to do, and that's what they did. And when you can't do all the things that you could in like the pool you have now, John, it's pretty amazing what he did. You know.
Well, do you think that playing in that pool, I always wondered if people that played in those pools or practiced in those pools, if it put a little chip on your shoulder, you know, like everyone else had all this great stuff. And
No, I don't think there weren't that many pools at that point, right?
Well, you had Brown, right? You had Brown, Navy.
Other than Brown, maybe Pitts.
Well, these guys didn't have Navy. Navy didn't move into that place until my freshman year in 1982. So, but Navy, but John, we did. We had, and Paul and Garen will probably did. We had a chip on our shoulder against the Browns and the Navies because we felt like they had been sort of given more than we've been given.
I tell you what.
Yeah, go ahead, Garen.
I was going to say that whenever we went to Navy, I remember that first game, that pool might as well have been 115 yards long or meters long to make that adjustment from our pool to go to 30 meters. It took a while to make that adjustment, right? But
the only thing about also playing in a small pool though sometimes is everything has to be so efficient, right? Yep. Your passes have to be right there. You put the ball on the set and you're off by, you know, someone's going to steal the ball. You put it a little out of bounds, it's going to hit the wall and go out of bounds. So, and everything was much more physical because everybody can grab and hold each other, especially in the shallow end. So you had a sense of toughness playing in a small pool. That was probably one of the advantages that you had versus the big pool. Just my, you know.
Well, I'll say one last thing on the huge positive. We had the most amazing crowds at Bucknell and with that little pool, and they would pack them in, and there'd be kegs of beer up there, and there'd be all kinds of things going on up there.
The decibel level in that building would be rocking and shaking. It was the most exciting thing in the world.
It really, really was, and it really was an asset for us to have teams come and try to compete with us in an awkward pool in front of a really, really, really raucous crowd. And it was a lot of fun. Absolutely.
Awesome. I'm going to turn it back to Kyle. He's got another question. We'll go in a circle. We'll start with Tony again.
What advice do you have about networking and finding the right job after Bucknell?
Well, I'm probably the wrong guy to ask because I was probably the least network-driven guy I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do, and so it wasn't until later on that I realized how strong the network can be utilized if you have the right, the right contacts. Scotty and Hilk and some of these other guys might be a better source. So I'm gonna back out on this one.
Jeff?
I'll jump at what networking is everything in business, and I know, my first job out of Bucknell was in Huntington Beach, California. I purely landed that job because of a networking opportunity through my roommate, who was also a water polo player at Bucknell. The entire time I was out there in California for 2 years, Schulte called me once a week and kept telling me that I needed to come back to New York and play for the New York Athletic Club. So much so that he convinced Lou to buy me a plane ticket, come back for some bogus tournament, probably the Whacker. Hoffy was a headhunter that lined me up with a bunch of interviews, and I landed a job back in New York in 1988, and moved back and have never moved out of New York City since. But changed jobs half a dozen times since then. But it's purely through your networking, your ability to talk to people, let them know, who you are, what you do, what you're interested in, and and if you're trying to throw your hat in the ring, tell people. Tell you won't go anywhere if you don't let them know that you're looking, that you're interested, that you'd like to talk about opportunities. And nobody's better than the networking than Schulte over here. So.
Well, I'll kind of feed into that. That's a great intro. Thank you. I will tell you though, Kyle, is that when you go for your first interview, okay, and you're like the 1,000 other kids coming out of the school with hopefully a high GPA, they're going to look at your resume and say, okay, did well in school, blah, 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 blah. But, oh, this water polo stuff. Tell me a little bit about that. Okay, because that differentiates you from everybody else, right? And then when you go and talk about, number one, why you did the sport, the discipline, all the different personality things that make you a better, taking that same strengths you had to become a great water polo player into the work world, that's exactly what they want to hear. So, and one thing I'll say about networking, because I love networking, but I think it's also your personality. I don't know you well enough, but obviously the fact that you're on this thing means you have, that's kind of your personality, right? And as you kind of, even as you're going through this senior year, you start thinking about, how do you meet people? Right. Well, what do you meet them through? You can meet them through Bucknell alumni. You can meet them through the water polo world. You can meet them through family and friends. Usually you have an in, and if you can use that in, that's going to get you in the door. The network's going to get you in the door. You on your own are going to determine whether you're successful or not, but the network is going to give you the opportunities that you might not get elsewhere. And in the world we live in now, with all the LinkedIns and everything else, I'd strongly suggest as you go through this year, just start building up your list of people and just make them aware you're out there. And any kid who's coming out of college and takes the effort and time, time to reach out to me, and he's a Bucknell alumni, I'm going to talk to him. And I think that you'll find that in general when you do that, if you take the effort to do that. So just my opinion.
I want to jump in here real quick and tag on what Scotty was just saying about having Bucknell water polo on your resume. I'm almost a year into my new position with the new company, and when I was going through the interview process, which a lot of it was Zoom-like, which was kind of new to me, I spent 15, 20 minutes talking to the interviewer about my experience of playing Bucknell water polo. I've been out of the sport for 32 years, yet it still stood out. So you take that and you run with it and you show your uniqueness with that, because that's going to stand you out among others. Also, even though you may not be looking for a job because you have a good solid one, it's always good to continue interviewing to stay sharp with it. Use your interviews as practice sometimes, even if you're not fully committed or interested in a position. It always helps to do an interview with the company just for the practice and for you to reinforce your strengths and what you need to work on. But networking these days is very different than what we had way back when, and it's obviously critical for business.
Yeah, I guess I'll just add to it, but I have the same story that some of you have, that I got my job on campus when AT&T came on campus. It just so happened the VP had a daughter who was in 8th grade and just trying out water polo. And for me to be able to turn the conversation from, and Scotty made a great point, from one where you're just another number he's talking to, into somebody that now can directly relate in a different way, I believe that's what got me that job at AT&T right out of college. And I didn't necessarily even appreciate it until I got to the New York Athletic Club a year later, and I realized, just how much the club was, the individuals at the club, including Scotty and Jeff and all these guys, were doing to help college kids, in the New York area and around to kind of continue and get into their careers. So I absolutely am a big proponent of use water polo to stand out and try to demonstrate through water polo the things that you've learned, whether it's different, skills, but if nothing else, your confidence will show. And it's just an obscure enough a community and a small enough community where we all want to help each other. We all want to do what we can to make sure our fellow players have opportunities to grow in their life. So take advantage of that, right?
Yeah, and I guess just I'll pile on there. I must do 250 or 300 interviews a year, and hire 50 or 75 people a year. And you look for things as the interviewer. You're looking for what's unique about this individual, and do they have something to talk about? You don't even sometimes care what it is, but do they talk about it with enthusiasm? Do they talk about it with passion? Do they talk about it with what benefits they got out of that experience? And I personally hire athletes all the time, not necessarily water polo players, but athletes, because in the world of sales and so forth, you want folks that are disciplined, that have a regimen, that are competitive, that exhibit a lot of the that are. I'll laugh when I say that are cocky, that have a little bit of swagger when they walk into the room. That's what you look for.
How many of those networks have you guys made from opponents? Like, you made friends on other teams where maybe in the pool, but yeah, right. It's a small sport, so how does that carry over and benefit in networking? You battle somebody in the pool.
I'll give you one story just in particular. Even like late. I mean, I've been around it a long time, and there was we were coaching back when they used to have the not the National League. What was the league before the National League? What was it called?
Premier League.
Premier League.
Yeah. So I was coaching the Premier League, and we had to have 2 high school kids on our roster. And we ended up having this kid from California who had all these, he was a phenomenal player. This kid named Trey Davis, but he was a total flake. I mean, he just thought he was the greatest things in Kingdom Come. Make a long story short, he goes to Europe, totally screws up, and his father calls me. He says, "Hey, listen, can you help this kid at all?" And the next thing you know, I put him in touch with Bruce Watson at West Valley College, and he came back. And the next thing you know, he was so indebted to me for helping that he ended up becoming one of my biggest clients. Not right then, maybe like a year down the road. And the relationships you can make, and the way you can come back and it can help you in the business world is you just never know. And it can be just a huge thing. It really can.
Awesome. All right, last question. And you can take the gloves off if you want. We'll just throw it out there. What's your most memorable moment at Bucknell? And again, PG, borderline R-rated, just PG-13. How about that? Most memorable moment at in Bucknell water polo, and why?
I'm going last on this one.
I'll go.
I've got two, but very short and sweet. But everybody was talking about the pool and building up the huge crowds and the kegs in the back and whatnot. It was my first year at my second year at Bucknell. And we were playing New York Athletic Club, and they were national champions, and they had all these older, very experienced, very sneaky, dirty players, the Harris brothers, and
Not anymore, Tony. That was only back in the day.
that was way back when. But the place was packed, and it was really we ended up winning 3-2, and the last 2 minutes it was so loud that you couldn't even hear the whistle. So you had to interpret what you thought might be a foul or who might have the ball. But you had to just guess kind of what was going on because it was so loud. And that was the first time that New York Athletic Club had lost to a team like Bucknell. So that was kind of the beginning of the swing over. And then at the end of my career, we played our final game at NCAA's, and we were out at Long Beach. And we had just won the sixth place game or something. And we all looked at each other and said, now what do we do? So we went out and we started floating around in the pool and throwing the ball around like the season was over, our careers were over, and we just didn't want it to end. So it was that impactful. I'd still be floating out there if we didn't have to catch a plane.
Anybody else?
I'll just jump in really quick and say, I didn't realize my freshman year that the way what we accomplished that year wasn't kind of like an every year thing, right? So, but beating Navy, winning our conference, getting in an NCAA's and performing pretty well out in California, the path to get from where we started that season to becoming champions like that, to me, was an amazing ride. And as Jeff and Paul know, we had to go through a couple of interesting games to get there. And that there's that overtime game against Navy to win the conference and things. So there's lots of interesting things about that particular season. But I think that experience of being paid off for all of the hard work by being able to make it to that type of championship, NCAA championship type of thing was really a great thing for me as a freshman to experience, and didn't realize at the time that that's a very, very rare and something to be appreciated type of experience for sure.
Absolutely. Bill?
Yeah, I'll riff off that. That was my senior season at Bucknell, and I attribute that a lot to Paul and how hard he worked and was the MVP of the conference finals that year, and Garen and how hard I worked to make sure he came to Bucknell and not go someplace else where I would have had to play against him. That was a overtime final at Navy playing in front of all their fans, where we got the monkey off our back. And then we beat them up at Brown the following week at Easterns to secure the spot at NC2As, and get to go out and beat Stanford, who was 36-0 that year, and steamrolled us in the first game. But we recovered. We played a respectable first half against Cal State Long Beach, and then beat Loyola in the final. That was the most memorable experience. That it goes back to that game though at Navy where we beat them in their home pool in overtime, and I had gotten opened up. I needed a couple stitches over my eye after that game, which I waited till we got back to Lewisburg, and the trainer, who lived down on St. George Street, stitched me up without any anesthetic. Although I was drinking beers at her kitchen table, which she'll probably deny to this day. She was actually Comer's roommate and Marla's roommate. But the thing I remember about that game was we needed that last goal at the end of overtime. We got a 6-on-5. I was up top with Kopecky and shouting for him to pass me the ball because I'm going to jam it home. And I'm like, what's this freshman doing? He's got stars in his eyes. And Garen rammed it into the upper corner, and I said, all right, I'll give him that shot. But it was a great that was a great season. It was a magical season, that season of 1985, and everything kind of went our way. So that was my most memorable experience.
And Kyle, what you're hearing from all of us is kind of what I want to drive home is just the camaraderie and the team unity that all of us have had with our teams. It's you go to morning practices, you eat lunch together, dinner together, you go down and hang out. Weekends are this huge dedication of time for the sport. And what I remember most are just the van rides on the trips. I mean, I came and saw you play Princeton in the tournament last September, and when I parked the car in the parking lot, I walked out and I see a big ass bus sitting there. This is Bucknell Bison on the side. I'm like, the football team here? We crammed 15 people in that school van, and we drove God knows how many hours. So you're very fortunate to have that bus. But the point is that the friendships last forever. I mean, there were at least 4 guys my senior year that we still keep in touch with on a regular basis. And it's funny, even though we haven't really talked a lot over the years between all of us, you kind of pick up where you left off last time you met. That's just what it's like. It's a friendship. It's a brotherhood, really, what it comes down to.
I'll kind of, just one thing is the worst of me in the van would be to be in Russell's car with him, okay, which the freshman had to do. So it could be worse than just being stuck in that van. The two things I'll kind of remember, and it's interesting because it's way back after the fact that you think it's the most memorable, but obviously the game before Tony got there, our freshman year against Pitt, which obviously everybody, the Randazzo wrote this big article about it, and it kind of grew into its own. And it gets back to what Paul was just saying. One game, and suddenly people can remember a game from 40 years ago like it was yesterday, right? And the one thing that you always hear the adage, never give up in a game. And that was the prime example of a game where, you're down with 2 goals with I don't know how many seconds to go, and you somehow figure out a way to win the game. And how that game, how the program kind of evolved off that win and the momentum it built for the whole program for the next, how many years, right? I would say that was one memorable. And then our junior year, the thrill of victory, the agony of defeat, we go up to Army for Mid-Atlantic Championships, and we lose to Brown in the championships. I mean, to Fordham in the championships, which no one expected us to lose. And I think I had the worst shooting game of my career. I was like 3 for something terrible.
You hit all those girls up in the stands, Scotty.
Yeah. Well, it was all I know is it was a long ride home. And the advantage was we still had Easterns. And we could all got down on ourselves, and we could all been feeling sorry for ourselves. And we come back and we go out to Chicago, and we somehow pull out a win of Easterns against Illinois Circle at the end of the game on a 6-on-5 that I don't know what the hell we were doing. So it happened, and we won the game. But it was like, the thrill of victory, the agony of defeat, and just coming back from adversity and then being able to turn it and win. And that's real character. That's character that you take on into your career. There's going to be days in your career where it sucks. Okay, you're going to come home, and then your wife's going to be pissed at you too. And then your kid's going to be screaming. And then you got to go back to work. And then you think it's the bottom, and then you get through it. And then you move on, and you grow from it. So all these, as Paul's saying, all these things that happen to you in a water polo career, it's going to just, you'll take those experiences, and they'll obviously benefit you in your next part of your life.
I'll just say one more thing before Todd closes out. But Paul, this kind of goes back to what you were saying about the van, because I rode in a van too, and I think that Kyle and this whole group, riding the big buses, I think that the van rides are things that these guys are missing, even though we can't do it nowadays. But I think that's the time when you're in the van that teams nowadays miss, because that's when you are really bonding. Win or lose, you're stuck right next to each other. You're 4 to a seat, slapping peanut butter on some bread. Eating bad pizza at McDonald's or whatever. It's the bus is not the same as the van, and it's unfortunate that they don't get to ride in a van with Bucknell painted on the side. So maybe we can bring that back someday. But right now, keeping up with the Joneses, we can't. But there was a lot of value to riding in those vans. So
absolutely.
Yeah. So
Let Jeff drive, because then he'll stop at the beer barn on the way.
I only did that in the spring season, never in the fall.
Well, guys, what an awesome session. It was awesome to hear all the great stories and relive the memories of you guys. And first, I want to turn my attention to Kyle. And Kyle, thank you for joining tonight and taking the time out of your schedule to join us. We heard some great advice from these guys on the networking, and that you take that back to your teammates and realize how special your time at Bucknell is and how quick it goes by. We're all keeping our fingers crossed that this spring you'll be playing competitive games. Who knows, but we hope that's the case. And if you are, we'll be in Kinney Natatorium rooting you on. So good luck with that, and good luck with the rest of this semester. And guys, what a great session. It was great to bring you all back, and really thankful for not only what you did while you were here at Bucknell in the pool and how you represented the school so well, obviously all outstanding athletes, and brought the water polo program and the athletic department so much great pride. But it's also what you've done since you left Bucknell and how you guys have all been behind the program. And that's really, really appreciated. And our student athletes know that they can't have any success that they have today without the support of the alumni. So I thank you guys all for what you do in that regard as well. And then for those of you that tuned in tonight at home to watch, we thank you for doing that.